Patrick Gavia, thank you for coming, man. I really appreciate this.
My pleasure, man. Thanks for the invite.
So, the main question of the day. I'm driving to Pittsburgh. It's a 6-hour drive. And I put Demetrius Johnson podcast on. And I'm listening. And that happens, right? Where Demetrius Johnson brings up your video to Joe Rogan, okay? And I don't know if you were listening it to the podcast or someone just sent it to you. Like when you heard or saw, like, what was your reaction?
It's funny. When I saw that he went on Joe Rogan, I started listening the first 30-45 minutes. Then I had to go do something. And then I just saw a comment on one of my videos saying, hey, like, Demetrius Johnson just mentioned you, blah, blah, blah. And I went to listen to it, and it was so funny, man, because it got so close to them showing the video, right? But it slowly goes downhill as he's doing the plug. So he's like, have you seen that video? The UFC erased me by Patrick Gavia. And it's just like, and then he kind of slightly turns to Jamie, you know? And that's usually the moment where Jamie pulls up the video and they watch it, you know? And it's the one time Jamie didn't do it. And it was just kind of funny. It was kind of a surreal moment. I got that close, you know? But it was hilarious.
But I feel like Joe didn't even understand what happened. He was like, there was a bigger point Demetrius was making, so Joe didn't want to like interrupt him. But I feel like, yeah, anyway, that was cool though.
To be honest, it doesn't matter that much to me. You know, I think it's still a pretty cool moment that it happened. They were just, you know, having that conversation, and regardless of whether the name or the video gets pulled up, it's like, I'm still going to do the same thing the following day, which is, you know, like, tell the best story I can possibly can, improve as a storyteller, you know. And what I found particularly cool about that event happening is just the amount of people that reached out to me, and they were like, and they felt, you know, that, hey, this guy I've been following for a few months, for a year, you know, he's being recognized that now. And like, they felt also seen, like, through me, because they've been supporting me for a while. And I just find that, you know, that's what matters most to me. It's like, you take the people, you know, that follow you, the people on your team, and when you know, are being mentioned on a bigger platform, like, they feel like they have a part in that, you know. That's the coolest part. It's like doing that with your team, doing that with your fan base. That's it, you know. Good things are gonna come, you know, God willing, of course. I don't know why I say God willing. I'm not even religious. I've been working on Habib videos for too long. That's what this means.
That's
Inshallah.
Funny. That's funny. The way you create your content, you can see that before being just a UFC fan, which you might not even be. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if you told me, I'm not even like necessarily a UFC fan. It just kind of happened. I think you're a filmmaker first. That's my read on when I first saw your video, which is like, okay, this guy's clearly a filmmaker. He's not just like a fanboy who likes to edit to cool stuff, some videos. No, he finds a core conflict, a story to tell. Like, not just a conflict. That's like a part of it. You find a story that you want to find within the certain kind of group of people in the industry, in the sport, and you tell that story. So tell me, I want to know, who is Patrick Gavia behind all of this? Tell me about yourself.
Well, I've been telling stories and, you know, making small films for as long as I can remember. You know, that's just what I do. And I've been pushing to develop that skill and like getting more invested into that craft year after year. And then you come to a point where you realize that what you're doing, you know, it touches a lot of people. So, you're getting to a point where people get invested in what you do, or you just put it in front of their faces and they're like, that was a great experience. And when I started a YouTube channel, I definitely did not at that point decide to do only UFC, only MMA. That's what resonated first with an audience. So part of that was a strategic decision to like just give the audience more of what they want. But also, you know, aside from that, it's like when you make documentary filmmaking or you just tell any story, it's like I feel like there's a part of responsibility that comes with that, of like, whose story am I going to tell? You know, does Bill Gates or Mark Zuckerberg right now need another documentary? Like, do they need to be glorified even more? It's like, there's no way to say this without sounding arrogant, but like, who deserves your time investment? Who deserves your talent? Back when I was working at a job, we were more in like the self-development industry. And I applied my talents to glorify a bunch of like fraudulent self-development people who would preach things and give advice, but wouldn't have the life experience to back it up. And I'm like, I'm just pushing this pyramid scheme with my talent, you know? Back then, we didn't really decide what I was doing, you know, I was working at a job. So when I decided to go off on my own, it's like, well, what kind of story do I want to tell? And who do I want to in some way glorify? If I'm telling the story of the hero's journey, you know? And I feel like it takes a really special human being to go into martial arts and to follow that path. And I feel like most martial artists, most people who go and get to the level of the UFC, they're like a special breed of human being, and that they value things like virtues, courage, being brave, perseverance, resilience, showing up in a cage and fighting another man in front of millions of people and risk being humiliated, getting knocked out. They do that in front of the entire world. They train. Like, they train every day. They get injured. They push through. But it's like, nowadays we live more in the age of victimization, right? Nowadays in society, this is how you acquire power. You victimize yourself. You cancel other people. You complain. And I feel like those people are the opposite of that. And I'm like, you know what? Let's go there. Let's tell those stories of these men and women that don't necessarily have a voice, you know? There's nobody really on their side telling their story from their perspective. Often it's done from the UFC's perspective, which is also good. Like, the content that they make is great. But it's like, I feel like those kind of people need a bigger voice, a bigger platform. And like, I don't feel like, you know, my talent or my attention or my efforts are being wasted by telling those stories. I think the world deserves to hear those stories, and I think those people deserve to get their stories told. So that's why I decided to go in that direction. And you know, there are so many stories, so many people in there that have incredible stories. And if I'm being honest, also the sport lends itself to storytelling very well. So that goes more into the craft part. But you talked about conflict. It's a sport that's, you know, built around conflict, built around a point in time where two people are going to step into a cage and fight each other. So I'm just happy I found myself there, to be honest.
You know, Woody Allen says it's the only unscripted thing you can watch nowadays. I love sports. I always loved sports, and I kind of value them like that they're fascinating stories. And I'm so happy, like someone like you who is highlighting them, because they're actually exciting to see, not just for sports fanatics, but for regular people, because they're real stories. You can actually associate yourself. You can actually feel something. You identify with these people. You understand them, even though you have kind of nothing in common.
It's interesting because that's something I said to my father a while ago, because, you know, I live in Canada, so a lot of people here watch hockey, then, you know, football. But I was telling him how I feel like martial arts, to me, is the only real sport. Everything else is just a game, you know? Because, you know, you play hockey, and I'm not throwing shade on any other sport, although I am, okay? You play hockey, it's like, it's cool, but it's like, what, you're gonna put that rubber puck into a net? And it's like, that's just a game, you know? Basketball, amazing sport to watch, super entertaining, right? Throwing a ball into a net, you dribble. Like, martial arts, fighting, it's like, it's you versus the other man. There's no explaining to do, no rules. Anyone around the world will sit down and understand what's going on. And the consequences of losing are extremely high. You know, it's your health, it's your reputation, it's your identity. You lose a hockey game. What happens? What happens? You lose a basketball game. What happens? You know, the the ramifications of that are so much more insignificant than losing a fight in front of the entire world, you know? And there's this very primal aspect of just like surviving while you're in there, you know? That again, when it comes to storytelling, I find is so much more powerful. So I definitely relate with what you're saying, and I feel like when it comes to UFC and MMA, it just even takes it to a superior level, you know? And I've said that in the past, like I feel like the UFC is the closest equivalent to the Marvel Cinematic Universe that we have in real life, you know? Because you have all those characters coming from everywhere around the world, each with their own story, and they cross paths at some point and they fight each other, you know? And there are all those storylines that as a storyteller you can build and intertwine. And I do feel like some of those guys are the closest things that we have to superheroes in real life. Because what they do, they sacrifice a lot, and for a large extent of their career, they don't do it for a lot of money. They do it for practically nothing. And they still do it because they believe in that lifestyle and what they do. You take someone like Francis Ngannou and what he's been through and where he is today. I can't think of many people in the world, you know, that have accomplished that. So
what's your process of picking the right story? Because there's something special about the way you do it, so nobody else does it, right? So how do you do it? What's your process? Which story to tell this time?
There's always a weird part of my process where, you know, of course I see what's coming in the MMA world, but then, you know, reading the stories, I try to really find the soul of like the fighter or the subject. And that part of the process is just like connecting with that person on an emotional basic level. It's like, how do I see myself in him or her? How do I connect with that? And then I can build that up as a story. Because there's that saying in writing, like, you can only write what you know. And I really believe that. It's like, I can't translate someone's journey or what they've been through if I can't connect with that piece of their story. It's like, if you've never cried in your life or you've never experienced sadness, you can try to portray it on screen, right? And then you're like, oh, I know what sadness looks like. It's like, it looks like crying. So just do this with your face like, you know, but there's nothing unique about that. When you try to portray sadness in a documentary, you latch onto that feeling, that heartbreak that you had. Then you remember that. And then the craft is about stacking the layers of sadness through sound, through the narrative, the story, through colors, through music. And then you learn to build that emotion in the layers of like filmmaking. So the most important part of the process is like finding the meaning of that person's story, finding the emotional core of that story, and then be able to translate that for an audience. And try not to lose the core of what you're trying to say in the process, which is the most difficult part. Because telling a story well, I feel, is about subtracting the unnecessary. It's like carving a block of marble, right? You have all the story details, which is like a huge block of marbles, and as a storyteller, you're just like chipping away what doesn't really fit in that statue that you're trying to mold. So when someone looks at the statue and looks at the piece, they see what matters most, and it provokes that emotion within them. So that's how I try to work and make, you know, videos or content, you know. And I know for a fact that not even in Hollywood, man, they don't ask themselves this question. They do like special effects, right? They focus on the spectacle. They never focus on imparting meaning on an audience, right? We lose that. We lose that in storytelling. We lose, what am I trying to say through all those fucking explosions? Am I, you know? So that's what I try to do. That's how it feels unique, but it's just because we forgot about that, man.
So your point is kind of you're doing something that filmmakers have done forever. We just kind of forgot about how to do it because we're conditioned to bad content, to bad films.
You know, I get passionate about it, but the truth is a lot of people, that art is not lost. It's just like, especially in Hollywood, now the focus is so much on franchises that we focus on properties that, you know, we already know they're going to work, right? Because the way it's set up now, it's like, hey, if I invest 200 million in a movie, I need to know I'll make my investment back. So I'd rather make Batman 9 than invest in this project which has a heart, but it's a gamble. So there's a lot of storytelling quality, I would say, in productions that aren't necessarily playing in the big movie theaters, you know? And I do believe that on YouTube, 100%, the next independent wave, like filmmaking wave, I believe is going to come on YouTube. And I think there again, we'll find a passion for good storytelling, because this is what the audience will resonate with. And if the algorithm does its job well and can calculate like the quality of the experience that the audience has watching a piece of content, they will push that content. So, I mean, it's definitely not a lost art. I see good storytelling in a lot of places, but in terms of like mainstream storytelling, I do feel like we're lacking the meaningful part of it. If you watch a movie like The Matrix, you know, The Matrix has changed a lot of lives just because it has those three layers. It has the spectacle layer, it has the emotional layer, and it has a meaning layer, you know? And right now, like in mainstream storytelling, we only focus on spectacle anymore. It's like you watch the old Lion King in 1993 or 1992, and you watch the one that was done 3 years ago, and you're like, something is missing here. Yeah, the special effects are amazing, but it seems like the heart is not there as much, you know? Because we're focusing on that Beyonce soundtrack.
That's a very interesting point you bring up about this idea that YouTube might take over. So a few questions here, because that is actually something very interesting to me, kind of the future of films and the future of movie theaters, right? Like, I old school film lover, I still go to movie theaters. Like, I went to Pittsburgh, I actually went to a movie theater that's 100 years old. I watched the movie Tar there, and I just had a lot of fun. It's like a simple movie theater, but I love it because it just gives me this kind of feeling of the reason why I fell in love with films. So it's kind of special to me. But I also am aware that they might be obsolete in another 100 years. You know, another 50 years, that movie theater is not going to exist anymore. And I do think that YouTube and streaming now, right, like Netflix and all these guys, they kind of becoming something else, right? If nowadays it says Netflix new movie, you know, it's like, wait, what? Like, oh, it's a studio. Like, and it has been for past more than 10 years probably at this point. They've been making films and shows, and everybody's making films, Apple and all these guys. YouTube, I feel like they tried, right? But then it hasn't really stayed. Like those big production, like even Cobra Kai was at first on YouTube. First season came out for YouTube, but then Netflix bought it. So YouTube still feels like more raw. Your videos, you advertise them as Netflix quality documentaries
On YouTube?
Help me out.
That's,
On YouTube, right?
yeah.
That's it, right? That's it. Yeah, there's nothing else. Yes. So, but if we're like very honest, it still has that like a social media like tensity and tempo, you know, your stuff. It still doesn't have this like, we're making a documentary, I can have like a 3-minute intro, right? Which Netflix documentaries still do. No, you still do like the yeah, I gotta grab people's attention in first 10 seconds. You know what I mean? I don't have more.
The more I work on YouTube, the more I'm realizing that, hey, YouTube is not film. You know, we're pushing the boundaries of a new medium here. And I feel like personally I'm sitting on that fence between social media, being a YouTuber, and what I aspire to be, which is like a successful filmmaker. I'm either sitting on that fence or like trying to push that boundary and what it means. So it's a very exciting place to be. At the same time, that's also why I think Hollywood doesn't stand a chance against YouTube in the future, because the YouTube algorithm will push a video mostly based on how many people click on it, but also the average view duration, which is how long do they watch. And if they watch for a long time, it's probably a good video. If they click off, it's probably a bad video. So people who are doing content on YouTube are learning to make something good, and they get feedback right away and they can learn. I can watch all my videos, look at the retention graph, see where it dips, and see what I did either in the visuals or in their storytelling, and be like, I will not do that again because I lost like 5% of my audience there. In Hollywood, they can't really measure that. You know, maybe on Netflix they probably can. But that means that the people who are active on YouTube right now are learning at a much faster pace to tell a good story than having a movie in development for 2 years, filming it, editing it for a year and a half, and then measuring the audience's response mostly based on gross revenue, right? So we're learning at a faster pace. We have more rapid feedback, and that influences the quality of the content. Now, we're already seeing that impact mainstream movies. Like I watched Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, which, you know, I had a blast watching it, again, in terms of spectacle, but it felt almost like watching a TikTok movie. Every scene was so, you know, like colorful, popping. The pace was high the entire movie. And I was like, man, this feels like I'm watching something on social media almost, but it's a movie. And more we're seeing the pace of movies accelerate faster and faster. If you watch a movie from the 70s, you know, it takes you about 15 to 20 minutes to adjust to the slower pace. Then your brain can slow down and appreciate the movie, but at first it feels like everything is very slow. Now everything is accelerated. However, I don't necessarily think that means, you know, you started your question with talking about movie theaters. I think, you know what, I think something special might be happening in that it might resuscitate movie theaters, because we're all appreciating right now the YouTube content from the content of our home and alone. But we'd all like to be surrounded by that community. And I think I'm starting to see, I heard of like 2 companies right now which like screen YouTube content in movie theaters. And it's cool because now the communities can regroup. Like, to be honest, there's nothing I would love more than watch one of the piece of content that I produce, like surrounded with people, surrounded by subscribers. Because like, hey, let's all appreciate this together. You know, because I made this for you guys are here. And it's like, you know what, if, let's say I'm a Mr. Beast fan, and, oh, he just released a new video. It's like watching the premiere of a Marvel movie. It's so much better when you're surrounded by Marvel friends, because you're all like screaming together, laughing together, crying together. So I do see a future where like it's possible that content creators building communities will participate to like the renewal of like the movie theater experience also. So I think the future is super bright for that medium, for people who get invested into bettering their storytelling by, you know, applying the rapid feedback and bringing communities together.
I mean, I hope for that. I hope that happens and stays like that. YouTube is kind of this like holy grail, right, of like social media content creators. Like, if you can maintain people watching your video for 30 minutes, right, or 40 minutes, that's like, oh, wow, like that's great. That's a lot of work. You kind of succeeded, you know, in a way that, because watching a 30-second or a minute video is a lot easier and it's a lot less commitment than watching 30-40 minutes, right? They really gotta like you for them to watch your stuff. But what do you make of TikTok?
Yeah, it's interesting because you hear about TikTok and you hear about shorts a lot right now. And at the same time, you're seeing podcasts, which is like 3-hour long content, just boom. And it seems like every movement creates its counter opposite. It's like, and you ask yourself where you should position yourself in that. And to me, it comes to what is it you want to do as a content creator. So I don't personally feel like in 1 minute I can accomplish what I can accomplish in 10, 20, an hour long. But I do see a lot of people doing super creative stuff within those boundaries. We all say like the boundaries create the creativity. And I really do think that shorts and TikTok rising will actually create a hunger for longer, more meaningful, attention-focused content. I see one creating the other and even complementing each other. It's true that, attention span, we're feeling like is being reduced, but it's also that we have more choice now than ever before. It's like before you go to a movie theater, right? And the experience of going to a movie theater is like sitting at home, deciding you want to watch that movie, maybe hiring a babysitter, driving your car, buying the ticket, buying some popcorn, sitting down. You've already invested an hour of your time behind that decision. So when you sit down and you watch that movie, you will give it a chance to be good because you've invested so much in it. And even if it sucks, you will probably watch it till the end. On YouTube, there are 200 thumbnails competing to catch your attention. One wins. You're giving it 10 seconds, maybe not even 5 seconds when you start watching the video to claim your attention. If at any point in time you doze off, you click on something else. So part of that is the attention span of people going more to shorts, but it's also like the wide array of choice and how like truly like maybe some super like smart people who could have become scientists or engineers became advertisers and content creators, and now all their mental resources goes towards catching your attention, and so we don't really stand a chance as an audience member, to really like. That's why I think podcasts only being audio and just like you create that relationship with that voice is really like thriving at the same time. And I do feel like it's just interesting to see technology evolve. Like right now, there's the podcast golden era, which I see as being like radio 150 years ago, whatever, when radio was invented and everybody would listen to radio. And now with the Mr. Beast and Eric on YouTube are kind of launching the TV era on YouTube. And I do feel like, the filmmaking era is coming also. When it comes to shorts, I haven't found my place in shorts personally. And I don't really have an interest there. But I don't necessarily feel like one impacts the other. I think one might feed into each other, actually.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. Tarantino was saying the same thing you talked about going to a movie theater and that investment. Tarantino was talking about the value in renting movies back in the days where you rented films. You got to watch them because you paid for them, you brought them. Even if it sucks, you have 2 days to watch them. You're going to watch versus browsing on Netflix, right? It's a common meme now. You browse longer than you actually watch anything, right? Because you're afraid to commit. You're afraid. You always have FOMO, right? You always fear of missing out a good one and clicking on the one that sucks. So like it's kind of the same.
And it's interesting to think about Tarantino. You take Reservoir Dogs, you take Pulp Fiction, and you put that on YouTube. Would it go viral? And you're like, well, no, probably not. But that's where it shows that it's really a different medium where some of even the masterpieces of cinema might not perform. So we're really creating something new, That's the exciting part of it.
That's a very good point. And I think on YouTube, the cool thing is that you get to choose, right? There are films on feature films on YouTube that are made by smaller filmmakers. There's certain festivals that post their films that have won certain awards on YouTube, and there's an audience for that. Some of the videos have millions of views, right? So the cool thing about YouTube is that you could be watching cat videos, you can be watching shorts, literally, it could be your TikTok, or you could be watching Patrick Gavia UFC documentaries, or you could be watching films or gaming channels like Let's Plays for hours. So speaking of, there's an interesting connection because you're Canadian, right?
Yeah.
You are. So there's this kind of rise of Canadian filmmakers that's been happening. Well, like particularly not just Hollywood, right? We have Denis Villeneuve, who is like a Canadian, but like that's like one guy. I'm talking about this YouTube new generation of Canadian videographers, gear people. You know what I'm talking about, like Peter McKinnon and like a hundred more. Like and then you are also Canadian. There's something like, is there something happening in Canada that we're not aware about that just like kind of boomed? There was like they opened a new film school or something happened in Canada, like culturally. It's crazy, right? And have they inspired you at all, any of them, or you don't know what I'm talking about? Maybe.
That's a good question. I always feel like Canada somehow produced, pretty good artists in music, also in comedy, specifically like Jim Carrey, Mike Myers.
That's right. Yeah.
But I don't know, man. I don't think a lot about where I'm from and my nationality. I've always been very invested into American culture, even though I'm actually French Canadian, so there's that part of where I'm from as well. But I don't, I feel like we live in an age where we're really super obsessed with, race, gender. I'm Canadian, I'm this, because maybe we live in an age where there's a lot of pain associated with all that. But I'm more interested into what's universal, how we're all the same. So to be honest with you, I don't spend a lot of time thinking about Canada or being Canadian or
well, I guess I was just curious.
Or the kind of labels that we put on each other. It's like that's something I don't like about the world right now. We're all super obsessed with like, this is how I define myself. This is where I'm from. And this is why we're different, or this is why my people are better. It's like, no, man.
But I mean, not to be devil's advocate, I'm curious.
Yeah. No, please be. Please be the devil's advocate.
I mean, listen. First of all, like overall, I agree with you. I don't like that neither. But there's something about like when you make a Khabib videos, right? There's something about Dagestani people, right, that you almost maybe admire. And you want to differentiate. When you want to explain where they come from, you want to emphasize that they're not just an average person walking down the street. You probably have never seen people like them. And I'm talking about it, I'm from Azerbaijan. My father like lived his last years in Dagestan. So like this is like they're, to me, Khabib and all those guys, they're like my people almost. They're all from the Caucasus. And like Rafael Fiziev, hopefully you make a video about him, but he is my homeboy. So
it's interesting it's interesting once you put a piece of content out there, it doesn't belong to you anymore. It belongs to the audience and that piece of content. And there's a new relationship that gets created. And you as the maker of that piece of content, you don't get to comment on that. I'm saying that because of course I talk about coming from Dagestan in the Khabib documentary, just to explain like where he's from and the different reality. But to me, this is still a story about the impact that a good father can have, that one good father can have on the entire world. So to me, the heart of this story is really the father-son relationship, and that's universal. This, if you're someone at home who watches that story, no matter where you're from, you should learn from that father, and you should learn that the impact of being a good father and a good person is truly cannot be measured. So even though it's specific to Dagestan, that story, it's universal on the relationship that is described. Even for Islam Makhachev, to me, it's about brotherhood more than anything else. The power of having a good friend showing you, what life is about, which is what Islam says in his own words. And that's always what I try to find in each and every story. So you at home, even though you're not living in the mountains, kids don't all fight each other like they do in Dagestan in the streets. You can take a piece out of that story and apply it to your life, and let it influence, like what Abdulmanap Nurmagomedov accomplished, we can replicate. Not to such an extreme extent where maybe the youth here in Canada is not as much at risk than there, but there's always peril and evil around you, and you can always make the choice of like, no, I'm going that path and I'm applying my energy to this thing. So I mean, again, you can view it in a specific lens, which doesn't make it, it's not because I did not intend it that way that it's wrong. Again, it's your relationship with a piece of content. But to me, that story is deeply universal. Yeah.
How would you go about making a viral video? Like at this point, you've done few videos that have gone, like they've had a million plus views, like a bunch of them. And they take, maybe not overnight, they actually take some time to get that viewership. But what would you tell to a young person who wants to do YouTube? What is like a piece of advice would you give?
People have a lot of pressure when they get started on YouTube to like, oh, I need to go viral and I need results now and I need to get monetized. When I started my YouTube channel, I was like, you know what? I'm giving myself a year or two to get monetized. And that's like getting 1,000 subscribers. And I will allow myself to make the kind of content that I would want to watch. Not the kind of content necessarily that would work. Like, I think this type of content is missing, and I would love to bring it to life, to make this thing that doesn't exist. And like, there's probably, back then I was thinking there's probably like 2 or 3 guys in the world that would appreciate this piece, and hey, if I can find those 2 or 3 people, and we can have that deep connection, because I do feel that like you can be close to me, you can be my neighbor, you can even be in my family, and we can talk every once in a while, but never have the kind of connection that you or I probably have with this piece of content in the middle. Because like, I pour my soul into this, and if it resonates within you, it means that we share some kind of piece of soul, without getting too cheesy about it. But so, I mean, you see a lot of people, right, trying to replicate the kind of tactics that make a video go viral, but they don't make something that's unique. They don't make something that's them. You want to make something that you love, because you're going to be sitting down at that desk every single day, and if you don't love the process, and if you don't believe in what you're doing, and the results don't match the amount of effort you put in, you're either going to burn out or you're going to quit, and you're going to develop a resentment for this dream or this thing that you loved in the first place. So that's what I told myself when I got started. I will make things that I would want to watch, and I will improve upon these things. And that's what YouTube would allow you to do. So you'll post a video and you'll get instant feedback. Nobody clicks on this thumbnail. Nobody watches after this part. You lose 40% retention in that first 10 seconds. Learn to do that better. Learn to edit, to do the stuff on the surface better, but keep the heart, keep the heart. Because like, if you're into YouTube, if you're into filmmaking, you probably were driven to those things out of passion and love in the first place. And it's really a tragedy to lose those things in the discouragement of like the results not coming up. So give yourself some leeway, have some patience for the results, and learn to love the process of making more. You'll never be a perfect artist. You'll always judge your work. You'll always feel like, everybody feels unrecognized, underappreciated. We all feel like that. And learn to become a better more complete human being in the process, and that will actually feed your work also. Because I do feel like your work can only be as deep as you are as a person, and vice versa. You know, your work is an extension of you. So if you better yourself, you become a better human being, that will improve your work as well.
What does future looks like for you? I know you mentioned earlier that UFC is the only UFC is the martial arts, the only kind of sport for you. But would you say that you're gonna stick to that and that's it? This kind of new discovery, and you want to keep telling those stories? You don't have any interest in jumping in other sports or telling completely some other kind of stories? What is, if your channel has like 10 million followers, next 5 years or whatever? What do you see your content out there to be? What do you want it to be like?
UFC and mixed martial arts is a pretty difficult niche to be in when it comes to monetizing, because those organizations are very protective of their content. I mean, rightfully so. The content is behind a paywall, so you can understand why but that means a lot of what you do is being demonetized. I would say the UFC is probably the worst niche to be in that regard. I'm definitely gonna, with each and every single video, I try to push the envelope, because I don't get motivated by doing the same thing twice. And my ultimate dream is making feature-length films. So to me, every step that I take is towards that direction. The challenge is making the transition in a way that makes sense, and in a way that the audience doesn't feel like they've been baited, bait and switch, like you're betraying them. The audience, the people right now that watch what I do, they mean a lot to me. And I want my next steps to make sense to them and entertain them and keep providing the reason why they watch my content. So I'm definitely going to introduce at some point more either fictional stuff or really trying to bridge the gap between social media and filmmaking. So it's difficult for me to translate because I do feel like what I want to make currently might not exist in that niche or in that world. But I do have plans, which I'm still working on. But you know what? The goal is still like improving on my craft, becoming a better storyteller, and putting things in the world which I feel like are missing. So pushing the envelope of storytelling on YouTube, whatever form that takes.
Do you have a favorite film?
Favorite film?
Yeah.
I have a top 5. If I had to choose,
Sure.
Shawshank Redemption.
Oh,
yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. That's like kind of like a perfect movie.
It's funny, when it came out, it flopped.
Oh, yeah.
It's when it was released in home video that it had success, and then they put it back into movie theaters, which is fascinating.
Written and directed by Patrick motherfucking Gavia. Is that how you want to be remembered?
Man. Well, yeah. Yeah.
It does say something about your personality. So it is like it's present. You are present in your videos. You are the narrator, and that's even something as simple as that is I don't want to say statement, but it says something, about you. And it's good. It's a risky move, but it works.
Part of me being in the video is realizing that I'm not going to get to my goals on my own. The way I get to my goals is with my audience. That I do see a future where audiences finance the films that they want to watch. And they will finance those films by believing in the director, and part of that is developing that relationship and that trust with the director. So it's much more difficult if you never see my face, if you never hear my voice, because you don't realize that I'm a human being just like you, and I believe I can do great things in that medium. And so part of putting my name, part of deciding to put my face in front of the camera was like me talking to you and discussing right now my ambitions with you, because I don't want to hide them. I want my audience to know, like, this is where I want to go, and there's no going there alone. You know, when it comes to filmmaking, is the most complex art that requires a lot of people, a lot of organization, and, you know, money. And so I would love, what I'm really excited about, to be honest, there's that new app that allows you to invest in athletes like they are stock, you know? And how amazing is that? Because let's say you see like a Bo Nickel right now entering the UFC, and his stock is like, let's say at $2, and like you buy whatever, $500 of it, because you know this guy is special and he will be champion, you know? And then as his star rises, you profit from that as well, you know? And I'm like, sooner or later, this has to come to YouTube. This has to come to artists, where people who believe in you should also benefit from like you know, improving, rising to the top. And the vision I had going independent was like, one day through crypto, maybe through another medium, it's like people will finance your movie, but whatever percentage they finance, they will get back in profits. You know, this is gonna happen. It's like, how amazing it is to switch the balance of power from like middleman executives like making all the money, from like, hey, you're a fan, you pay for this thing to exist in the world, and if you believe in it and it works, your life also improves. Everybody just improves. You know, it's like a major shift, but it's like, I was thinking about that future, and that's a big part of what pushed me to like, hey, let's make it happen. You know, maybe it won't happen for me, but if I can be part of that movement and like put my shoulder to the wheel and push it, you know, it's an amazing future for artists, for everyone.
It's a beautiful, that's a beautiful future you paint. I mean, Chris Stuckman, who is like he reviews films, and he has been doing it on YouTube for past like 12, like ever since I remember just watching YouTube. He's been on it, and he's been just reviewing films, and you could see he's bright, and he does it very kind of straightforward, no BS, you know, doesn't have to show any footage, or even he might be showing like trailers or whatever, but that's not the point. Like, his ideas are what people like. And after so many years of doing it, his followers financed his film. So like he put it like on one of the whichever Indiegogo or Kickstarter or something, and it got so many. It's all available. It's not even like a gossip. It's all available on his YouTube channel. He talks about it in depth. He got financed the film like in overnight or something like that, or in 2 days. I don't exactly remember. Don't quote me on that. But some big studio approached him and said, "Hey, you know, we're actually gonna, you know, just take it. If people really like you so much and want to see it, we're gonna just finance it." So it's either it's probably not A24, but maybe the other what's the other guy, the Blumhouse, you know, because it's a horror movie. So but we don't really know which studio. But still, like, how crazy is that, right? Like, you cut the middleman. You didn't have a producer. You just worked very hard with your followers. They made it happen. I mean, it is very fascinating and interesting. You know, so anyway, man, I mean, I wish you luck with everything. I'm watching. I watch all the videos. Well, is it going to be a Adesanya Pereira story or no? Or
Yes.
That's too much into... Okay.
That's
right. I can't wait.
Exclusive
it's another week.
information. Israel Adesanya is actually my favorite fighter in the UFC.
No way. Okay. Tell me about it.
Since I started doing this, I'm like, I want to tell a story. But I already knew about Pereira back then. But he's been climbing his way up fast in the UFC, and I'm like, you know what? Stars will align, and he will fight Pereira again, and that's the perfect character arc. Like, I knew the story I wanted to tell, and I'm like, no, wait. Put the brakes on it.
It's definitely a movie, man. That's definitely a movie.
This perfect story is coming.
Well, what do you think is going to happen? Who's going to win?
Izzy's going to win.
What do you think? Izzy's going to win, you think?
I believe in Izzy. I believe in what he's accomplished. And I believe mostly in the mental work that he's done. So I'm a ride or die Izzy fan. No matter what happens, man, Izzy's going to end up with the belt.
In his weight.
Oh, are you throwing shade at? Okay,
Yeah.
you know what?
He tried. He tried.
When
You
he
know.
tried, okay,
Yeah.
he tried, and
No, props for him, man. I love Izzy. Don't you get me wrong. He's
that's the
amazing.
thing, man.
Yeah.
That's the thing in this sport. It's like the moment someone loses, you see people just like, man, Charles
Yeah.
Oliveira went from being one of the greatest of all time to just like people, the way people shift their perspective on someone. You know what? Like Izzy tried, and I think he was weighing like 200 pounds in that fight. Like he didn't even put on that much weight, and you got to respect that. And but it crossed my mind when I saw Prokaska become the champion. I was like, Izzy's got to try it now. You know, because the styles
Match more. Yeah.
that I felt like if Prokaska and Izzy would have fought, and I was legit hoping for that fight to happen, maybe it will happen in the future. I was like, I think Izzy now can pull it off.
Yeah, that's true. Blachowicz is very heavy and he's wrestling heavy and he knew what he was doing and he just, but Izzy was like unscarred. He didn't get destroyed or anything.
No, Izzy after that fight, he was like, no, I'm good. You know, I could still
Yeah,
go,
yeah, yeah.
which tells a lot about a guy at a lower weight class. And I still respect him for trying. You know, like we judge people for failing, but we should judge them for fucking trying and having the courage.
No, and honestly, I think you're giving too much crap to UFC fighters. Look at what's going on in boxing. I feel like that's the shitty of the like that's where it happens. What you're saying happens there the most. Like people get destroyed after they lose. Like where's Andy Ruiz? Like at some point he was this big thing where nobody's talking about him at all. He's not even in a picture. He's not relevant, but he's an exciting guy. Like it was fun to watch him fight. And he became a champ, and now like that's it. Nobody's talking about him. I feel like UFC, like look at Nate Diaz or to Tony Ferguson, right? I mean, how many fights he lost? Probably, I think more than he won.
Yeah.
And then people still love him. The same with Tony. Like he hasn't won in like, I don't know, 4 years, something like that. But people still like seeing him.
Yeah, it's fascinating how we love champions, and a part of like human beings also love seeing champions fall, because there's this kind of power dynamic. When someone becomes a champion, it's like they elevate themselves to like that higher, social class, however we perceive them. That inspires us, but at the same time, it's like they've done studies on like what gives human beings the most pleasure, like seeing someone they love succeed or seeing someone else fall. And as human beings, we get more pleasure from seeing someone from a higher social class fall. And that tells a lot about like humanity and those things inside us, more of our shadow side as human beings. And I think that happens when we see a champion fall. When I saw Kamaru Usman getting knocked out, I swear I was sad, man. It just sadness, because it felt like the end of something. It felt like maybe a reminder that time passes and of our own mortality. I don't know what it is, but it was like a dark day. Not that I'm not happy for Leon Edwards, but it's like, I don't know. There's something about people becoming champions and shining a light, but also people getting pleasure from seeing them fall. Maybe because it reminds us that we're all human.
It's a double-edged sword because I feel the same. I was sad for Kamaru. I was happy for Leon, and it's like, well, it's both. It's both feelings at the same time. Like I don't really have like one fighter that I'm obsessed with. I guess I like Rafael Fiziev because he's from, I don't know. There's something there, right? It's a little tribalism comes out of me too. I'm like, let's go, like. But so I root for him when he fights. I like my Dagestani guys, of course, but doesn't mean I hate Charles Oliveira or I don't even hate Conor. I don't hate anyone. Like I like all of them. Conor did so much for the sport. Like, is there gonna be just a Conor story, or there's just too many of them?
There is gonna be for sure. If I do end up leaving the MMA niche at some point, which I might end up doing, I will do so having a John Jones and Conor McGregor, out there, just because the audience really wants it. So I will do it for sure before I do anything else. And it's just interesting how, you talked about Rafael Fiziev and the Dagestan guys. Like, we often like people that we see ourselves in, And in storytelling, that's what I try to do often. It's like, let me show you how this person is similar to you, so it doesn't become this person's story, it becomes your story. You know, you create a bond between the person and you as the audience, and then you start experiencing the emotions that they're experiencing because you've connected at that level. And it's true for the people we like, and it's also true for the people we dislike. You know, often the people we dislike, we don't like to admit it, but it's because they reflect the things that we're either unconscious about ourselves or the things that we don't like about ourselves. So I always find it fascinating when people will compliment things about other people. You know, when you say to someone, hey, you're a really kind person, you know what? Only kind people say that to other people. You've never seen a fucking asshole compliment someone on their kindness, because it's not something that they value, you know? It's kind people that compliment kind people. And it's often selfish people, let's say, that will dislike someone from being selfish, you know? But they're not aware of that. So I always find that fascinating when people talk about people that they like or that they dislike. It tells more about them, you know, about the things that they value. So if, let's say, you talk about Rafael Fiziev right now, and I'd ask you, hey, why do you like him? What you'd compliment in him, it's like, this would tell me what you value as a person and within yourself as well, you know?
Absolutely.
That's when you get invested into storytelling, it's like you notice those things, and it's really fascinating because the bridge between storytelling and psychology and everything there's no such thing as that bridge. Almost.
That's very true. So you're saying you don't like Rafael Fiziev, and there's no video about him. Just kidding.
I don't. To be honest, I don't know his story well. There's always a long research process that goes into deciding to do a story. He's on the come up. They suggested he'd fight like Charles Oliveira. No, I've seen his fights. I love his performances. He's a scary fighter. So
yeah, no, for sure. You gotta find what to grasp. You know what I mean? You can't just say, oh, he's a hardworking guy. You know, that's just not enough.
Yeah, but you know, people coming from more turbulent or chaotic parts of the world, you know, usually have very interesting stories, and it does explain on the kind of person that they become. You know, often the more you suffer, the more you have to find meaning for that suffering to happen, the more you have to adjust your behavior. It's like, you know, you live in Canada, you're someone like me, you know, I don't have a crazy story, you know what I mean? That's why I tell other people's stories.
No one can tell you that your experiences are invalid, right? No one can come to you and say, well, if you knew what I went through, you wouldn't be complaining or you wouldn't be crying. But that's irrelevant, because the hardest thing you've had to do in your life, that's the hardest thing you've done in your life. And there's going to be always someone who's done something so much scarier and worse than Khabib wouldn't even see in his wild dreams. You know what I mean? Wouldn't even see it because it's that much scarier. Or Francis Ngannou wouldn't be able to see because, you know, so, and there's this constant kind of culture of battling who's got it worse. And it's irrelevant because that's not important. At the end of the day, we're all people. We're all you proving it. You making your content. You proving that I have more in common with Khamzat Chimaev than or whoever, or Dustin Poirier, right? Who grew up in America. I didn't grow up in America. I have more common with him than I thought. Well, we're all kind of share more than we don't. Whatever happened in your life, you put you on this path, and you doing something cool, something really unique, something cool. I get excited because I'm a filmmaker, I'm a storyteller, but I've loved sports all my life. I loved boxing when I was a kid. I love UFC, and I love soccer. And you can't take that out of me. I think actually soccer has some incredible stories. I wish there was a filmmaker like you who would be that passionate about soccer, because trust me, there's some incredible things, dramatic things that have happened that you cannot even believe it. You know, you cannot. And there's a good movie. What's the guy's name? Sorrentino, the Italian filmmaker, right? He made the film Hand of God, which is in reference to Maradona's Hand of God, right? It's a great film because he made a feature film about his childhood. He grew up in Naples, and he's from there. And you know, Maradona is Argentinian, but he played for Napoli, which is, you know, the local Naples team, and how significant it was in his life, and how he matches the Maradona's goal with his hand to his life. But anyway, my point is, I've always been told that, well, sports are just BS, you know, whoever, nobody cares about sports. I'm like, no, guys, there's so many cool things you can be doing and watching and being fascinated by these amazing stories. So I'm very happy somebody's doing it.
Yeah, I mean, you have to see it in it. You know, people who don't realize that, it's just like they don't have the ability to see it, to be honest. They have their prejudice against, there's a lot of prejudice against MMA, but some people are like, see themselves, oh, I'm in this intellectual and I read books and I go to museums. And sports. It's like sports, you know, I've said that thing about sports and games, but what happens between two whistles, if you see the value in it, can be the best of what humanity has to offer. You know?
Yeah, I agree with that.
And an entire lifespan can metaphorically happen within the span of a fight or a game, in terms of ups and downs, in terms of everything that can happen, everything that goes into it. But you won't be able to see it if you refuse to see it or if your mind is not open to it. So you only see as much value in the things that you consume than what you value yourself, you know? So it's a loss to people who don't see it, but at the same time, it's not a bad thing that we're seeing value in different things and niching down in different things. It's what makes, you know, the vastness and the richness of the human experience, is that someone from MMA and someone who's passionate about like painting in the 1600s can sit down and, you know, share with each other, you know, instead of all consuming the same things and having the same conversation.
Yeah, well, you know, people are not supposed to see it, right? So people just have to be shown. And that's where you come as a bridge, as a storyteller. You translate those things into the, you know, to the regular people. I mean, they're easy target, right? For someone like me and you are like, they just don't see it. They're prejudiced. But you know what? You're not, instead of, again, complaining and keep just kind of repeating the cycle, you went for it and you just telling these stories to these people. And I'm pretty sure there are people, including my fiance, who have shown your videos, who have she has nothing to, she doesn't want to know anything about sports or fights or whatever. But I'm like, look, this is going to be interesting, I promise. And she would watch it and she's like, okay, yeah, that was good.
Yeah.
That was good.
And it's also realizing that when it comes to things outside of sports or what we're doing, we are that person who does not maybe appreciate or see the value in the things we're not interested in. And like keeping an open mind and be the kind of person we'd like to meet. You know, if I meet you and you don't know anything about mixed martial arts and I'm talking and you're looking at your phone and you're looking elsewhere, it's like, hey, I might be that person to someone else who's talking to me about contemporary dance or something. It's like we're wired to point the finger and criticize what we don't like about the world. It's like, hey, that world lives within you. And so you kill the parts of the world that you don't like within yourself and you start bringing to life what you would like to happen within the world. So
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, Patrick, I really appreciate the conversation. Thank you very much. It was a lot of fun. Thank you for making, you know, some time for me, for a small, tiny content creator. You know, I'm happy I got to you before you get to the moon.
Appreciate the invite, man. I looked at your content before saying yes, and what you're doing is quality of questions, of the conversations, of what you were doing even visually is what, you know, pulled me in. So I mean, thank you for inviting me, for taking the time to do this. And I don't picture a future where I get disconnected from, you know, people say this, it's like, remember me when you get na 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 na, and it's like, I'm aware it's a pitfall of success maybe, but I'm hoping to stay grounded.
Well, don't forget, right? The beautiful, like, you know, this, like the, you know, in stories, right? The stories of gangsters, stories of people who like sportsmen, right? Athletes. They're all rise and fall, right? Of stars, movie stars. So they're all like, they're beautiful and they're dramatic because it's about rise and fall. Not saying you're gonna fall, but there's something that happens to us, right, at the pinnacle, and none of us know except those people. Something happens where we can't hold it, or we challenged again. How about this? We're challenged once again with something new when we're at the top. So you don't know that yet neither, and you should be excited for it.
Maybe this isn't for another podcast, because, you know, this rise and fall thing and everything, all the stories we're talking, you know, we're saying is always just a matter of perspective, you know. rise and fall. You know, people talk about the rise and fall of Conor McGregor, but it's only from the perspective of the UFC, right? He's been losing some fights, but in life, he seems to be doing well. He seems to be living the dream. So what about from the perspective of his children? Has he fallen? I don't think so. Well, I don't know. I'm not in his personal life. But it's like we see
But that's the point. But that's the point usually of those stories, to show that.
Yeah.
They have to teach us something, right? So they usually don't just say that you're doomed to fail. But if Conor thinks like UFC does, then he has fallen. But if he doesn't let that mindset get to him, then he has won, right? But that's,
Exactly.
you know, stories are stories. Stories are there just to teach us something.
But everything is just a story. Everything we believe, every single one of our beliefs, even our own identity, just a story we're telling ourselves. And it matters the kind of stories we're telling ourselves. It does matter. That's why good storytelling is important. And you can always rewrite what you believe or the things that you believe about yourself, you know? And once you understand that about the world, because like we've evolved to be really like storytelling machines as humans, it's crazy. It literally breaks the matrix of what you believe is possible.
Spoken like a real storyteller. Yep. Amazing.
All right.
Thank you, man.
My pleasure.